Rain painted the city in trembling streaks of silver. Through the glass walls of the penthouse, lights from distant buildings bled like lonely stars. Ava stood there, barefoot, wrapped in her father's old sweater, watching the skyline blur behind the storm. Somewhere below, the hum of luxury cars echoed, but all she could hear was the memory of his voice. "Don't fall for me, Ava." The words still haunted her, even after 3 years. That night, when their eyes met for the first time, she hadn't known he was him, her father's best friend, Ethan Ward, the man whose name everyone whispered in business circles, the billionaire who could silence rooms with a glance. It was her father's birthday party. Laughter filled the mansion, and waiters floated like ghosts carrying champagne. Ava had sneaked out to the balcony for air when he appeared beside her. He was older, confident, with a calm presence that made the noise behind them fade. "You don't like parties?" he'd asked, voice low, almost teasing. "I like the truth," she replied. He'd smiled, surprised. "That's rare these days." What neither of them knew was how dangerous that truth would become, how love could slip through the cracks of rules and ruin everything that felt safe. That night was supposed to end with a polite goodbye. Instead, it became the first spark of something forbidden. "Before we go deeper, tell me, where in the world are you watching from? It always amazes me how far stories like this can travel. Drop your city in the comments, let's see how wide the heart still reaches." Weeks passed, but she couldn't forget him. He'd become the silent question in her mind, the one she never dared to answer. Her father often talked about Ethan with admiration. "The man built an empire from nothing," he would say, "but he never let money change his loyalty." Ava smiled and nodded, pretending not to blush at the sound of his name. But when Ethan came over for dinner one evening, everything inside her shifted again. He walked in wearing a dark suit, rain still clinging to his shoulders. The house lights caught the silver in his hair, the same shade as the storm clouds that night on the balcony. When his gaze found hers across the room, something fragile cracked between them. "Ethan," her father called warmly. "You remember my daughter, right? Ava's back from university." Ethan's jaw tightened slightly, but his voice stayed calm. "Of course. How could I forget?" Dinner was a blur of small talk and laughter. But beneath the surface, Ava felt a quiet electricity. Every time Ethan's hand brushed the table near hers, her pulse raced. He never looked at her too long, yet she felt every second of his restraint. Later that night, as she walked him to the door, he finally met her eyes. "You've grown up," he said softly. "So have you," she whispered back. A pause. Then his voice dropped, almost regretful. "That's exactly the problem." He left before she could ask what he meant. Ava spent that night awake, staring at the ceiling, replaying the way he said her name, like it mattered. Days turned into months. She saw him at meetings, charity events, dinners, always polite, always distant. But there were moments, fleeting and dangerous, when the world seemed to narrow to just the two of them. One afternoon, she found him standing by the garden, sleeves rolled up, helping her father fix an old fountain. Water glistened on his hands, and sunlight caught the faint lines of a man who had lived more pain than he ever spoke of. "Did you ever fix something that was already broken beyond repair?" she asked quietly. He looked up. "All the time," he said. "But sometimes you fix it anyway, because you loved what it used to be." For the first time, Ava saw through the polished calm, the loneliness he carried behind his control. That moment, she realized, wasn't about admiration anymore. It was love, pure and terrifying. She should have turned away. She didn't. That night, when her father's laughter filled the house, she caught Ethan looking at her again, not with desire, but with sorrow, like a man standing at the edge of something he knew he shouldn't touch. Ava smiled anyway. And in that tiny, reckless smile, everything began. The following weeks became a quiet battle between longing and restraint. Ava pretended not to notice how Ethan avoided her gaze whenever they were in the same room, how he left conversations early, how his smile no longer reached his eyes. Yet, every time he spoke, every soft "good morning" or polite "take care," something inside her trembled. Her father, unaware of the undercurrent between them, often invited Ethan over. His practically family, he'd say proudly. That word, family, hit like a knife each time. Ava started volunteering at her father's company as part of her internship, never expecting Ethan to be the one reviewing her work. Their first meeting in his glass office felt like standing too close to a flame. "You don't have to treat me differently," she said, her voice steady but her hands shaking. "I'm not," he replied, eyes fixed on the files before him. Then softer, "That's what makes it hard." The air grew heavy between them. Every tick of the clock was a heartbeat neither could ignore. When she turned to leave, he finally looked up. "Ava, please. Don't make me the man who ruins what your father built." Her throat tightened. "Maybe you're the one who'll save me from everything he didn't see." Silence. Then a deep breath, the sound of a man trying not to fall. "If you were there in that moment, what would you have done? Be honest, comment your answer below. And if words fail you, just hit like to prove that compassion still matters." Ethan's self-control began to unravel slowly, quietly. He started showing up early to the office, offering to mentor her on projects. Their conversations stretched longer, laughter slipping through the walls of professionalism. Sometimes, their hands brushed when exchanging documents, accidental touches that burned longer than they should. Once, during a late meeting, the city lights flickered outside the window. Ava leaned closer to show him a draft on her laptop, their faces only inches apart. He froze, eyes searching hers as if asking for permission. "Don't," she whispered, though her breath trembled with the opposite meaning. Ethan stood abruptly, stepping back. "You should go home, Ava. It's getting late." But his voice cracked on her name, betraying everything he was trying to protect. That night, Ava walked out of his office feeling both proud and shattered. Proud that she didn't beg him to stay, shattered because she wanted to. The days that followed blurred into quiet torture. Ethan avoided her completely. She'd catch glimpses of him from across the hallway, speaking to her father or meeting clients, his expression unreadable. One evening, her father mentioned he'd be out of town for a conference. "Ethan might drop by to check the new designs," he said casually. Ava felt her pulse jump. She told herself she didn't care. She lied. When Ethan arrived, the house felt too quiet, too intimate. He stood in the doorway, hesitant, as if every step inside was a sin he couldn't undo. "You shouldn't be here," Ava said softly. "I know," he answered. "But your father asked. And you always do what he asks." Ethan's gaze flickered. "I used to think so." He took a slow breath, closing the distance between them. The rain began again outside, the same rhythm from the night they met. Ava looked up, her eyes reflecting the same question she'd carried for months. "Why are you so afraid of something that already exists?" she whispered. His answer came like a confession. "Because once I stop pretending, I won't be able to let you go." For the first time, she didn't hide her tears. Neither did he. Lightning flashed outside, casting their shadows close, too close. And for a fleeting second, the world forgot they weren't supposed to belong to each other. He stepped back before the moment could turn irreversible, his chest heaving with restraint. "Good night, Ava," he said, voice breaking. When he left, she felt the echo of something that was already too late to stop. The next morning came heavy with silence. Ava stared at her reflection, the sunlight spilling across her room like an unwanted witness. She told herself to move on, to forget the way Ethan's voice cracked when he said her name, but her heart refused logic. Every quiet corner of the house reminded her of him, the way he stood by the door, the faint cologne he left in the air, the storm that followed him wherever he went. At work, she pretended nothing had changed. Ethan didn't call, didn't text, didn't even look her way. But she saw him, always composed, always polite, as if nothing had happened. That calmness hurt more than anger ever could. One afternoon, her father mentioned, "Ethan's thinking of taking a break. Something about travel. Says he needs space." Her heart dropped. Space. The word felt like punishment. She wanted to ask why now, but she already knew the answer. Because falling for her was too dangerous. Because he was her father's friend. Because no amount of love could make it right in the eyes of the world. Still, knowing didn't stop the ache. Have you ever had someone help you when no one else would? Write yes and tell me their name. Maybe gratitude can travel further than we think. Ethan's departure wasn't loud. He left quietly, like all good men do when their hearts are breaking in silence. No goodbye, no note, just an email to the company saying he'd be away indefinitely. Ava tried to stay strong. She threw herself into work, smiling at people, showing up early, pretending her world hadn't just lost its rhythm. But sometimes, at night, she'd still stand by the window and whisper his name into the dark, hoping the wind might carry it somewhere he could hear. Months passed. Her father grew busier, proud of her growing role in the company. But the truth was, Ava wasn't becoming stronger. She was learning how to hide her weakness better. One evening, while sorting old files, she found a small envelope tucked between two reports. No name. Just her initials on the front, written in the handwriting she'd memorized. Her heart pounded as she opened it. Inside, a single line. I thought distance would heal me, but it only made me see what I lost. No signature. No explanation. But she didn't need one. Tears blurred the words as she pressed the paper to her chest. Days later, a rumor spread through the office that Ethan had been seen in another city, closing a new deal, colder than ever, like a man trying to bury something alive. Ava told herself she wouldn't chase him. Yet every night, her mind painted the same image, Ethan standing alone in some unfamiliar hotel room, looking out at another skyline, carrying the same loneliness she did. And maybe, just maybe, missing her too. She didn't know that fate was already moving to pull them back together. Not through choice, but through something neither of them could avoid, her father's heart attack. The call came on a Thursday. Her world collapsed in a single ring. Ava rushed to the hospital, trembling, her heart in her throat. The hallways smelled like disinfectant and fear. Nurses hurried past, and all she could hear was the echo of machines. She found him, pale, hooked to tubes, eyes closed but breathing. Relief and dread collided in her chest. And standing beside him was Ethan. He looked older, his eyes rimmed red, his tie undone. When he saw her, he froze, every emotion he'd locked away surfacing all at once. Ava, he whispered. I came as soon as I heard. She couldn't speak. The tears came before words could. For a long moment, neither moved. The years of restraint dissolved in one heartbeat of grief. Then Ethan stepped forward and pulled her into his arms. And for the first time, he didn't let go. Ava didn't know how long she stayed in his arms. The hospital lights flickered above them, the world reduced to the sound of beeping machines and Ethan's uneven breath beside her ear. 4 months, she had imagined what it would feel like to be held by him again, and yet, standing there, she realized this embrace wasn't love. It was desperation. When they finally pulled apart, their eyes spoke the words they couldn't say. How is he? She whispered. Stable, for now, Ethan replied. His voice was softer than she remembered, worn down by sleepless nights. He'll need rest, and someone strong to help him through it. Ava swallowed hard. Then we'll both stay. He nodded, hesitated, then added quietly, Your father asked for you. He's awake. She rushed into the room, heart pounding, while Ethan lingered at the door. Her father smiled weakly when he saw her. You're here, sweetheart, he murmured. And Ethan too. Good, you're both here. The way he said it made her pause, like he somehow knew the invisible tension between them but chose not to see it. Over the next few days, Ethan and Ava moved around the hospital like ghosts orbiting the same center. He brought her coffee each morning. She made sure he ate dinner before leaving. They didn't talk about the past, yet the silence between them was alive with everything unspoken. Late one night, as they sat side by side outside the ICU, Ethan finally broke it. I shouldn't have left the way I did. She looked at him, tired eyes shining. You did what you thought was right. No, he said, shaking his head. I did what was easy. Pretending distance could erase you was cowardice. Ava's throat tightened. Then what now? Ethan stared ahead, hands clasped. Now. I'm scared of what comes next. Because the moment your father walks out of that room, I'll have to decide whether to stay or walk away again. She turned to him, voice barely a whisper. And what if I don't let you? He looked at her, and in that fragile second, the world tilted again. Now it's your turn. Share one small good thing you did recently. Write it below so others remember that humanity still lives. Your story might light someone's path tonight. Her father recovered slowly, and as the weeks passed, home became a strange kind of heaven and hell. Ethan stayed longer than necessary, helping manage the company until her father regained strength. Every dinner, every shared glance, every accidental touch carved a deeper scar. One evening, her father fell asleep early in the living room, leaving the two of them alone in the quiet glow of the fireplace. Ava sat by the window, staring at the rain again. It always seemed to return whenever Ethan did. "Do you ever wish things were simpler?" she asked softly. Ethan sighed. "Every day. But if life were simple, I never would have met you." She smiled faintly, eyes glistening. "You say that like it's a blessing." He looked at her then, really looked, the kind of gaze that made air itself tremble. "It is. Even if it ruined me." Before she could speak, he stepped closer. The light flickered across his face, and in that fragile silence, years of denial finally gave way. His hand brushed her cheek, tentative, trembling. "Ava," he breathed. "Tell me to stop." She didn't. The kiss that followed wasn't wild. It was soft, broken, full of everything they had buried under guilt and time. When they finally parted, tears clung to both their lashes. He rested his forehead against hers. "We can't undo this," he whispered. "I don't want to," she said. And outside, the storm began again, as if the sky itself understood what it meant to fall for someone you were never meant to love. The rain hadn't stopped when dawn arrived. Soft gray light slipped through the curtains, touching Ava's face as she sat curled on the couch, lost in a silence that felt heavier than guilt. Ethan had left before sunrise, leaving only the faint smell of his cologne and the memory of everything they swore they'd never do. She pressed her fingers to her lips, as if trying to erase the warmth still lingering there. It wasn't regret that hurt, it was the fear of what would come next. When her father woke up, the house felt smaller. He was cheerful, grateful for Ethan's help, completely unaware of the storm brewing beneath his own roof. "I don't know what I'd do without that man," he said, smiling. "He's been more of a brother than anyone I've ever had." Ava's chest tightened. She forced a nod, swallowing the guilt that rose like fire in her throat. She tried to work, to distract herself, but every message, every meeting, every phone vibration pulled her back to one thought. Would he call? Would he pretend nothing happened? By evening, the answer came. Her phone buzzed. A message. Just one line. "Meet me where it all began. 8 p.m. The balcony. The place where their eyes first met under the rain. Ava stood there that night, trembling in the cold wind, her heart pounding like the sky before thunder. Then he appeared, coat-soaked, hair tousled, eyes darker than the clouds above them. "You shouldn't have come," she said, voice breaking. "I told myself the same thing," Ethan replied. "But lying to myself is starting to feel worse than lying to the world." He stepped closer, his voice low and raw. "Tell me this wasn't a mistake, Ava. Tell me I didn't just ruin everything for nothing." She shook her head, tears cutting through the rain on her cheeks. "It wasn't nothing. It was everything." He exhaled, a sound half like relief, half like surrender. "Then I'm already lost." They stood in silence, drenched and shaking, knowing that love this deep was both salvation and damnation. Ethan brushed a strand of wet hair from her face. "If your father finds out, he'll hate us," she whispered. "But I can't unlove you. And I can't unsee you," he said softly. The thunder cracked overhead, and for a moment, the sky wept with them. If that moment hit you hard, leave a red heart hash. Sometimes one little symbol says what our hearts can't. The days that followed were torture disguised as normalcy. Ethan stopped coming by, throwing himself back into work. He sent polite emails, signed with nothing more than "Eward." Ava replied formally, pretending it didn't feel like knives. Her father recovered enough to return to the office, and soon, Ethan's absence became the subject of friendly concern. "He's been avoiding me," her father said with a chuckle one afternoon. "Probably buried in those contracts again." Ava forced a smile. "Probably." But when she went home that night, she found an envelope waiting on her doorstep. No name, no return address. Inside, a photo, The two of them at the hospital, sitting side by side, unaware someone had captured it. Beneath it, a single note. Secrets don't stay buried forever. Her blood ran cold. She looked out into the street, heart hammering, but no one was there. Somewhere in the distance, thunder rolled again. And Ava realized the storm wasn't over. It was just beginning. Ava clutched the photograph in shaking hands. Her reflection in the window looked like a stranger, pale, frightened, trapped between love and fear. Someone knew. Someone had seen. She called Ethan immediately, her voice trembling. Someone left a picture of us. On my doorstep. There was a pause on the line, a sharp inhale. Ava, listen to me, he said, his tone instantly protective. Don't talk to anyone about it. I'll handle this. But what if it's already? I'll handle it, he repeated, firm, controlled, the same voice that once calmed boardrooms now trying to protect a breaking heart. He came that night, not as the billionaire CEO the world respected, but as a man cornered by love. His eyes burned with fear, not for himself, but for her. They are blackmailing us, he said quietly, placing the photo on the table. Someone must have followed us at the hospital or the house. Ava sank into the chair, disbelief flooding her chest. Why would anyone? Because I'm a man with everything to lose, he interrupted. And they know my weakness. Her tears slipped silently down her cheeks. I'm your weakness. He met her gaze. You're my reason. That's worse. They sat there in silence, the truth hanging heavy between them. Outside, the world kept moving. Cars passed, people laughed, life pretended it didn't notice two hearts breaking in a quiet house. Be honest, could you forgive after what they did? Type forgive if you could, or never if it would break you too deeply. The next morning, Ethan disappeared. No calls, no messages. His number went straight to voicemail. Ava's mind spiraled with panic until she saw the headlines on her phone. Billionaire CEO under investigation for corporate fraud. Her heart dropped. She read the article twice, then again, disbelief turning into cold fear. Ethan's name was everywhere. Anonymous sources. Fake contracts. Whispered scandal. She rushed to the office, but people were already whispering in the hallways. Her father stood in his office, the newspaper trembling in his hands. I trusted that man, he muttered. I defended him for years. And this is how he repays me. Dad, she started, but he cut her off, his face pale with betrayal. Do you know how this makes me look? He snapped. My best friend, stealing from under my nose? You've always defended him, Ava. Tell me you see him for who he is now. Her throat closed. Every truth she could have spoken burned like fire on her tongue. She couldn't betray Ethan, not when she knew this wasn't him. He wouldn't do that, she whispered. Her father's eyes narrowed. You sound sure. Too sure. Ava froze. For the first time, suspicion flashed across his face. That night, she went to Ethan's penthouse. It was dark, the security lights dimmed. His office was a mess, papers scattered, drawers open, his phone smashed on the floor. And there, near the window, she found him, sitting in silence, staring at the skyline like a man who'd lost his entire world. They are framing me, he said without turning. Someone leaked private documents, twisted numbers, and sent them to the press. It's not about money, Ava. It's about reputation. She stepped closer. Who would do that? He looked up finally, eyes hollow. Someone who wants to destroy me completely. And they're using us to do it. The photo lay on his desk. Now she noticed something she hadn't before, a faint watermark on the corner, Ward Enterprises Security Division. Her breath caught. That's your company's internal seal. Ethan's jaw tightened. Which means the person who did this works for me. Ava's stomach turned cold. The storm outside cracked like a warning. Then we find them, she said. Ethan gave a faint, broken smile. You still think I can be saved? She stepped closer, eyes firm despite her tears. You're not the one who needs saving. The next days blurred into sleepless nights and whispered plans. Ava and Ethan worked in secret, combing through documents, tracing leaks, and trying to find the name behind the betrayal. The deeper they dug, the clearer it became. Someone close to Ethan had orchestrated everything, not for profit, but revenge. Ava sat by his desk, exhausted, her fingers tracing the edge of a photo frame, one of Ethan and her father laughing together years ago. "Who would hate you this much?" she asked quietly. Ethan's jaw tightened. "Someone who once loved loyalty more than truth." He turned his laptop toward her. On the screen was an internal access log, time-stamped 2 nights before the story broke. The user ID made Ava's blood freeze. Her father's. "No," she whispered, standing slowly. "No, that's not possible." Ethan's voice cracked. "I didn't want you to see it until I was sure. But it's his credentials. He was the only one who had that level of access." Her knees nearly gave out. The man who raised her, who called Ethan his brother, had been the one who destroyed him. Ethan reached out, steadying her. "There's more," he said softly. "He didn't do it to hurt me. He did it to protect you." Ava's eyes widened. "Protect me?" Ethan nodded, grief and understanding twisting his voice. "He found out about us." The room went silent. Her father had discovered their secret long before they knew it. And instead of confrontation, he'd chosen destruction, tearing down Ethan's world so the two of them could never exist in it again. Ava's tears fell freely. "He ruined your life because of me." Ethan's hand trembled as he touched her cheek. "He did it because he loves you more than he loves me." She turned away, choking on guilt. "Then what do we do now?" He sighed, looking out at the skyline that once symbolized power and now felt like a prison. "We tell the truth. To him. To everyone. If you believe love still wins, comment in. Let's fill this section with hope. Maybe someone scrolling right now needs to see it." The confession came like fire. That evening, Ava returned home and found her father in his study, surrounded by memories, old photographs, worn books, and the weight of too many lies. He looked up when she entered, guilt already written on his face. "You know, don't you?" he asked quietly. She nodded, her tears barely held back. "Why did you do it, Dad? Why destroy him?" He stood, every word trembling. "Because I saw the way he looked at you. And I saw the way you looked back. You're my daughter, Ava. He's my age. My best friend. I couldn't watch you throw your life away." "You didn't protect me," she whispered. "You punished him for loving me." Her father's voice broke. "You think this is love? It's obsession, guilt, chaos." "It's real," she shouted, shaking. "And you destroyed the only man who's ever seen me for who I am." Silence fell. The clock ticked in the background like a slow, painful reminder of time lost. Her father's shoulders slumped. "Then go to him," he said finally, his voice hollow. "Tell him I'll make it right." Ava blinked through her tears. "You do that?" He nodded weakly. "If it means I get to keep my daughter's heart from hating me." That night, she ran to Ethan's apartment, the city lights blurring through her tears. When he opened the door, she didn't say a word. She just fell into his arms. He held her tighter than ever, whispering, "Whatever comes next, we face it together." For the first time in months, the storm outside began to fade, replaced by the faintest trace of dawn. Ethan woke before sunrise, the city below still wrapped in a sleepy mist. For the first time in months, his mind was quiet. Ava lay beside him, her hand resting lightly over his heart, as if to make sure it was still beating. He turned toward her and whispered, almost to himself, "We survived the worst." But fate wasn't finished testing them yet. By morning, the truth was everywhere. Her father's confession had leaked to the press. The news ran with it. Scandal unfolds. CEO framed by partner over daughter's forbidden affair. Ava's phone buzzed non-stop. Calls, messages, headlines, pity disguised as curiosity. Her heart raced as she scrolled, but Ethan gently took the phone from her hand. "Let them talk," he said quietly. "We spent too long hiding from their voices. We don't owe them our silence anymore." She stared at him, eyes glassy. "They'll never understand." "Then we teach them," he replied. That afternoon, Ethan held a press conference. Cameras flashed as he walked to the podium, Ava standing behind him, trembling but unashamed. He didn't defend himself with money or lawyers, only truth. I loved her, he said simply. And in that love, I found my humanity again. I made mistakes, but deceit wasn't one of them. Sometimes the wrong person at the wrong time is still the right kind of love. A hush fell over the room. Ava's father, watching from home, wept silently. He called later that evening. I was wrong, he said, his voice breaking. I thought love was something I had to control to protect you. But maybe, love protects itself. Ava cried as Ethan placed his hand over hers, their silence full of forgiveness neither needed to ask for aloud. Days later, the noise faded. The world found new scandals, new people to judge. But for them, life slowed. Peace returned in small pieces, morning coffee, quiet laughter, a shared look that said we made it. One evening, they returned to that same balcony, the place where it all began. The sky was clear for once, the city lights soft instead of blinding. Ava leaned against him, the wind brushing her hair across his shoulder. Do you think people ever stop judging? She asked. Ethan smiled faintly. Maybe not. But if you have love that survives judgment, it means you found something real. She looked up at him. And if we lose everything again? Then we start over, he said. As long as it's with you. For a long moment, they just stood there, the city glowing beneath them like forgiveness made visible. The night was quiet, calm. No thunder, no lightning, just peace. Ava closed her eyes, whispering, maybe this was how it was always meant to end. Ethan brushed a kiss against her forehead. No, he said softly. This is how it finally begins. If this story moved you, don't scroll past quietly. Tap like, not for me, but for the soul who carried this pain and still stayed kind. One click can be your way of saying, I felt you. And if you believe love, even the forbidden kind, can still lead to light, share this story. Someone out there might need to know that second chances are real.